What if a pair of goggles could show you something beyond the physical world? Soldiers in Vietnam swore they saw glowing eyes in the jungle, tall figures drifting between the trees, and even shapes that seemed to vanish when the goggles came off. But there was nothing there to the naked eye. Through those lenses, though, a very different picture appeared. Tonight, we're looking at the bizarre legend of demon goggles. Hi, and welcome back to Wicked Mysterious. And if this is your first time here, welcome. If this is not your first time here, thank you so much for your continued support. My name is Danny, and we explore all kinds of mysteries from aliens to paranormal stories to unexplained phenomena. So if you're into this kind of thing, check out my guide to what they don't want you to know about consciousness. It's a free ebook, and it's in the description box below. I am giving away a free 30-minute reading by raffle, and you're automatically entered just by downloading this guide. Channel memberships are also open, and they help keep episodes like this possible. You do get some extra perks in return. So, with all that out of the way, let's get right to it. So, some of you may remember the episode I did on seeing auras, and in that episode, I mentioned this story of infrared goggles and seeing entities, but at the time, I wasn't able to find many sources talking about it. So, here we are nearly a year later, and I thought I'd give you a follow up episode. There are almost no credible sources, no interviews, no direct quotes, which made this topic incredibly hard to investigate. And for this reason, I do believe that most of these stories are urban legend, but as always, decide for yourself. So if you are interested in seeing the original Aura video and all about dicyanin dye, I will leave the link here at the top of YouTube. So, okay, let's get to the goggles. These goggles had supposedly given soldiers a glimpse of something they weren't supposed to see. So, back in the mid to late 1960s, night vision technology was still new. The first models weren't anything like the compact gear soldiers wear today. They were heavy and awkward, and sometimes they were slung over the shoulder with big external battery packs, but still they did the job. They amplified whatever light was available to make it visible in the darkness. But there was a problem, or maybe, depending on how you look at it, a discovery. Some of the early systems didn't just amplify the light we normally see, they tapped into parts of the spectrum outside of human vision, revealing things that we normally can't detect with our eyes alone. And that's where these stories begin. The accounts that survive are usually anonymous, but they all have the same eerie themes. So, men on patrol described shapes with glowing eyes staring at them from the tree line during the Vietnam War. Some swore they saw skeletal outlines pacing alongside them, like a skeleton shadow, and others said balls of light floated through the brush, vanishing the moment they were noticed. One repeated account, though unverifiable, tells of a soldier recalling the scanning of the Mekong Delta in 1969. 40 yards out, something crouched, watching us. The eyes glowed red. I took the goggles off, and they were gone. Put them back on, still there. Then it stood. It was tall, maybe 7 feet. 2 steps, and it was gone. No sound, no heat, nothing. Interestingly, many of these reports came before the trauma of combat. The experiences weren't born out of PTSD. They often happened first and then haunted the men long after. One story comes out of the fire base Ripcord in 1970. A soldier wrote that on patrol he spotted a figure hovering in the trees, not perched on a branch, but suspended. Its 2 pale eyes locked on him for minutes before it blinked out. Another Marine described a stretch of jungle his squad nicknamed Hell's Window. Each time they crossed it, their goggles revealed 5 figures walking alongside them. Always the same number, very quiet, and gone when they took off the night vision goggles. It's weird because these aren't isolated stories about hallucinations. Entire units supposedly encountered these beings. To understand what we're talking about here, let's leave Vietnam for a moment and rewind a few decades. In 1910, a British physician named Walter Kilner became convinced that the human body gave off a subtle glow, what he called an aura, and he believed it could be seen with the right tools. Kilner used a dye called dicyanin dye pressed between two panes of glass. When observers looked through them, many reported halos, streaks of light, or even shifting colors around the human form. Kilner argued that these patterns weren't random and that they reflected different aspects of the human body, health, emotion, or energy. His research never really gained full acceptance, and dicyanin itself was eventually restricted, partially because of its toxicity and partially because the results were controversial. Now, many people will come at me and say it's not banned. Okay, I don't know. It depends on where you look. I'm kind of convinced at this point that it isn't banned just based on all of your comments, so I'm sorry that I got that wrong in my previous episode, but regardless, the idea of it being controversial still kind of stuck around because it was thought that this was a filter that could shift our perception just enough to make the invisible now visible. Now, imagine those early night vision goggles. If their lenses were coated with dyes or chemicals that mimicked this effect, either by accident or on purpose, it might explain why soldiers began seeing things the naked eye couldn't. Kilner showed that a small shift in how we look at the world can completely change how we perceive it. And in the jungles of Vietnam, that shift may have opened a very dark window. For more information on Kilner and dicyanin dye, check out my episode here. I will link it on YouTube. And I also have a guide on teaching you how to see auras, as well as teaching you how to astral project or lucid dream. I'm kind of building a very large library of PDFs and guides, but you can find that in my shop in the description box below. I'm sorry to shamelessly plug myself, but your purchases like those directly support this channel and help keep these episodes coming. So, theories about what appeared through their goggles vary depending on where you hear it. Some believe the battlefields soaked in centuries of bloodshed were haunted by restless spirits. Others think that the goggles opened a doorway between dimensions and allowed beings to slip in and out of our reality. Some even suggest that certain soldiers were unknowingly part of psychic experiments and the goggles amplified those altered states. But Vietnamese locals had their own explanations. There's a belief in spirits tied to the land itself, what anthropologists call Than Ruang, or forest spirits. Hunters and travelers would make offerings before entering certain stretches of jungle because it was understood that powerful entities lived there. To disrespect the spirits was to invite illness, accidents, bad luck, or simply you could vanish. There are what they call the Ma Ruang, literally translating to ghosts of the forest. These are said to be souls of the people who died violently in the wild, unable to move on. They might appear as flickering lights at night, or as shadow figures pacing the tree line. If you followed them, you risked getting hopelessly lost. Another story comes from Cambodia, just across the border, and this story says that forest demons that change shape can watch travelers from the canopy. Some accounts describe glowing eyes in the trees, which is similar to the soldiers' reports. Even among Vietnamese Buddhists, there is recognition that the dead linger. Graves left untended could give rise to the Ma Doi, or hungry ghosts, and they wander, searching. Villagers sometimes held ceremonies to pacify them, particularly after wartime. So, when American soldiers say that their goggles revealed figures walking alongside them or eyes staring at them from the jungle, we can't just dismiss it as a brand new phenomenon, because locals already had stories that matched these descriptions, carried through generations. From their perspective, the soldiers might not have discovered anything new at all. They might simply have stumbled into a reality that the jungles were already haunted by these entities. So, why aren't there any documented accounts of this? Well, some say there are, and that they're hidden in plain sight. Military reports mention phantoms and light anomalies, as well as visual disturbances, which of course is the sanitized language that could mean really anything. There's also claims that when the sightings piled up, the gear was confiscated and the soldiers involved were reassigned or evaluated for psychological issues. And some suggest the real interest came from agencies running black projects who wanted to study if these goggles had a way of observing something beyond our physical eyes. Modern optics are sharper and way more precise, but they're also heavily filtered. So, did those early models work wrong or did they work a little too well? Researchers today still tinker with filters, lenses, and full spectrum photography to try and recreate this effect. Results are patchy and sometimes fascinating and usually inconclusive. According to some retellings of this legend, an engineer allegedly explained the abrupt disappearance of those early goggles by saying that the soldiers weren't just seeing enemies, they were seeing things we couldn't control. So, what was really happening in the jungles of Vietnam? Were men catching glimpses of ghosts, interdimensional beings, or maybe the very human energy fields that Walter Kilner believed in? Or was it all tricks of the mind amplified by fear? We may never know. But the legend of demon goggles still lingers, a reminder that the tools we build don't always show the truth we want. Sometimes they show us the things that we don't normally see. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please consider subscribing so that you never miss a mystery. I'll see you next week, and until then, stay mysterious.